When people talk about Led Zeppelin's late 70s years, the conversation usually turns to excess, private jets, marathon shows, and the sheer size of their sound. But in 1977 and 1978, a different storm was brewing. Punk rock was tearing through London and New York, sneering at everything Zeppelin represented. Virtuoso solos, sprawling albums, stadium crowds. Suddenly, the band once hailed as the future of rock was being labeled dinosaurs. Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham heard the insults loud and clear, and they weren't about to fade quietly. Out of that defiance came a single, furious track, a song they wrote specifically to prove that Led Zeppelin could still be the most dangerous band in the room. That song was Nobody's Fault But Mine. By the mid-70s, Led Zeppelin had already changed rock music more than once. Their first 4 albums redefined hard rock and heavy blues. Physical Graffiti in 1975 had been a sprawling double LP masterpiece. But success brought baggage, endless tours, drug use, and a sense among critics that Zeppelin was bloated and out of touch. In Britain, punk bands like the Sex Pistols and The Clash mocked the giants of rock as self-indulgent relics. Newspaper headlines sneered at the dinosaurs, and even some fans started wondering if Led Zeppelin's era was ending. Jimmy Page felt the pressure more than anyone. He'd built Zeppelin's sound on a mix of blues tradition and studio experimentation, and he bristled at the idea that a few 3-chord punks could write them off. In interviews years later, he admitted that the new wave of punk woke us up. The band had been through personal tragedy. Robert Plant's car accident in 1975 nearly ended their touring career, and by 1976, they were searching for a reason to fight again. Recording sessions for their next album began at Musicland Studios in Munich in late 1976, and the mood was far from complacent. Plant arrived, still recovering from serious injuries, and the grief of losing his young son earlier that year. Bonham was drinking heavily. Page was consumed by heroin. Yet underneath the chaos, there was a spark. The challenge of proving that Led Zeppelin could match the raw energy of punk without abandoning their identity. They didn't want to copy the new sound. They wanted to beat it at its own game. Louder, faster, meaner. Nobody's Fault But Mine became the centerpiece of that mission. At its core, the song is a reworking of an old Blind Willie Johnson gospel blues number, but Zeppelin transformed it into a monster of speed and precision. Page built the track around a churning riff, full of sharp bends and rapid-fire slides, designed to hit like a freight train. The opening harmonica line, played by Plant, added a layer of menace that nodded to the blues, but felt urgent and modern. Bonham attacked the drums with a ferocity that rivaled any punk drummer, while Jones locked the groove with a bass line that refused to sit still. The lyrics carried a different kind of weight. Plant sang about personal responsibility and spiritual struggle, nobody's fault but mine, but the delivery was pure defiance. He howled as if daring anyone to call the band irrelevant. For a group accused of being soft and indulgent, the song was a thunderous rebuttal. Inside the studio, the atmosphere was tense. Page demanded takes with razor-sharp precision, pushing Bonham to hit harder and faster. Plant strained to match the intensity despite lingering injuries. The result was a track that felt both tightly wound and explosive. Even the production reflected the new attitude, gone were the lush, expansive textures of Physical Graffiti. Instead, Page and engineer Keith Harwood went for a dry, in-your-face mix. Guitars up front, drums pounding without reverb, vocals raw. It was Led Zeppelin stripped of ornament, ready to fight. When Presence was released in March 1976, critics were divided, but everyone noticed Nobody's Fault But Mine. It wasn't a radio single, yet it quickly became a live favorite. On stage, Zeppelin used it to silence doubters. Concert recordings from 1977 show the band tearing through the song at breakneck speed, with Page and Bonham locked in a duel of sheer power. Punk audiences might have been throwing safety pins and sneers, but Zeppelin proved they could still deliver something heavier and more dangerous than any three-chord anthem. The rivalry with punk wasn't imaginary. In London, music magazines were filled with jabs from punk figures who dismissed Zeppelin as outdated. Johnny Rotten famously wore a "I Hate Pink Floyd" shirt and mocked the old guard, and Zeppelin felt those barbs. Robert Plant later admitted that hearing themselves labeled as dinosaurs made us angry. Nobody's Fault But Mine was their answer, proof that age and virtuosity didn't mean complacency. Yet the song also reflected the darker realities inside the band. The lyrics about taking responsibility resonated with their personal struggles. Page's addiction, Bonham's drinking, Plant's grief. All of it hovered in the background. The furious tempo wasn't just for show, it was catharsis. They weren't simply competing with punk, they were fighting their own demons. As the 1977 US tour unfolded, Nobody's Fault But Mine became a nightly highlight. Fans remember the way Page would stalk the stage, his Les Paul slung low, ripping through the main riff with a sneer. Bonham's drum breaks were seismic, and Plant, still not fully healed, pushed his voice to dangerous limits. In those moments, Led Zeppelin weren't relics, they were warriors, proving they still ruled the stage. Tragically, the victories were short-lived. The tour was plagued by violence, including the infamous Oakland Coliseum incident, where members of Zeppelin's entourage were arrested after a backstage brawl. Personal troubles deepened, and by 1980, John Bonham was gone, ending the band. But Nobody's Fault But Mine remained a testament to their resilience. Decades later, surviving members have pointed to it as one of their proudest achievements of the late period.